We've been very gratified to see how many of you have gathered from around the world to participate in this Facebook group, Loving Parents Live. And it's been fun to learn that there have been thousands of other views from people who watch it afterward in the archives later in the day, or by going to the column on the left side of your Facebook page where one of the things says, or one of the things listed is units, and you can see them all, not all at the same time. And we're grateful for those who have made some donations to us to help us make this possible, because it turns out when we say we offer something free, which we mean, that means free to you, but it's not so free to us to do all the technical work and stuff that's involved. So we're grateful for the people who've supported us in that. We're amplifying materials that are found on realloveparents.com and at reallove.com, where you can see hundreds and hundreds of hours of blogs and video chats and video coaching sessions and on and on. So let's get right to our first parent who submits a question. And we're grateful for those of you who put your questions on this Facebook group, because those are the questions that we use to answer. We may not get to yours the same day, but we're getting there. This mother says, "Thank you for this daily group. My 5-year-old has started getting violent, throwing heavy objects, biting, kicking, whoever she feels is acting unfairly toward her." Oh, do children react badly to fairness or unfairness? What can I do daily to help her feel more loved? So listen slowly, which is my way of saying that the answer will be unfamiliar and possibly difficult to hear. She's really not feeling loved. Or another way to say it is she's distinctly feeling unloved by you, by your partner, if you have one, maybe both. Loved, happy children simply don't get violent. That's how I know. So it's not a guess, and no, I don't have video cams stashed around your house. They just don't get violent. So it's not an accusation of you, it's information. And throughout these answers, as I describe what's happening with the child or what the parent could be doing or could perhaps be omitting, it's never a criticism. Nobody ever taught us this class in parenting. Because your daughter doesn't feel loved, that makes her feel insignificant. Not feeling loved just makes you feel like nothing. I mean, if you're not loved, what are you? You're garbage. Makes her feel small, makes her feel less than worthwhile. And although she can't put words to that. She can't say, I don't feel worthwhile, I feel small. She knows that she hates how she feels. So then she's already hating it. That's her baseline, hating it. Then when she's treated unfairly, she hears the I don't love you message from the not being treated fairly even more loudly and painfully than she would otherwise. She cannot take the added burden to her already feeling insignificant of injustice. So then she just lashes out at people and things in a violent way. Why? Why would a child choose to get violent at injustice? Because in those moments of anger, and there's always anger involved, one, she feels more alive. Watch people on political talk shows who are just angrily denouncing pick a thing. No matter what their opinion is, if you just turn off the sound, look at their faces. They just look energized. Their hair is on fire. She feels more alive, and that feels better than the living death of feeling insignificant and small. Anger and violence are very energizing, even though it's brief. Second, she feels less helpless. Injustice just happens to her, like rain from the sky, and she feels helpless to stop it. Remember, she already feels small and insignificant, and then added to that is the helplessness of being treated unfairly. Nobody likes feeling helpless. Her violence makes her feel a little less helpless. And third, there are many reasons that people get violent, but we're just doing three. She feels more powerful, which is pretty close to feeling less helpless, but it's more active. When she's throwing things, she's watching how other people react. Now, here's a kid who already feels insignificant, and she starts throwing things and getting violent, and she notices that, hey, otherwise, now she doesn't do this consciously. She's too young to be thinking all this, but she's thinking unconsciously. Normally, I'm pretty small and insignificant, and people don't pay me attention. I start throwing things, and I start punching people, and everybody's paying attention to me. I kind of like this feeling. Or she frightens them, which makes her feel even more powerful. She feels like she's in control. So that's the why. That's why she does it. Now, your question, what can you do about it? Most important, it's not to control the violence. That's pretty tough. Because you control her violence here, you say don't throw chairs. Well, then she's going to pick up something else and throw that. And before long, she's throwing axes at people in the room. You need to get at the root of the problem, which we stated at the outset. She doesn't feel loved. So treat the roots instead of tearing the tops off the weeds, which are just going to grow back, and in her case, grow back really quickly. She needs lots of loving, like all the time. Right now, you almost certainly don't do this, because who wants to hold and kiss a child who behaves violently and is screaming and throwing things? We just reflexively back away or get angry. Or, ironically, when they're in the process of controlling everybody, we want to control them. So what can you do? I'm just going to describe one of many ways that you can love her, a way that will reach her, a way that I have used with violent children and violent adults many times. And I've watched people go from angry and throwing things and punching people to just still. And in many cases, crying, weeping, tears of relief. Sit down with her. If she's being violent sitting down, sit down on the floor. If she's being violent standing up, pull a chair over and put her on your lap. Look into her eyes. When children get angry, we tend to speak at them instead of really speaking with them. You look into her eyes and lock eyes, and it's almost hypnotic. Look at her and listen to her, both before the tantrums, during the tantrum, between the tantrums. Listen to her and say, indicate to her that you hear what she's saying, how unfair this is and how difficult this is for her to take, but not sympathetically, just indicating that you understand. The love that you give her proactively, not while she's responding with violence, but the love that you give her before the violence is the kind of love that she can receive unconditionally. It's much harder for her to feel unconditionally loved while she's throwing things, and then you respond to her. Then she feels like she just captured you as a captive. And that's the kind of love, proactive love, that heals her wounds and nourishes her. Just spend time with her. If need be, set an alarm on your phone so that at least every hour you stop what you're doing and you go spend just 5 minutes with her. You just sit down with her, and whether she's coloring or whatever she's doing, touch her, look into her eyes. She'll pay attention to that. I've had parents who have had children that they have described as unmanageable. And when I say, well, how much time do you spend with them? All day long, they say. All day long, I'm dealing with this difficult kid. No, that's just dealing with a difficult kid. You're not really spending time with your child. So every hour, go spend 5 minutes. And then I speak to them sometimes as little as a week later. And they say that the behaviors that have been just torturing them are gone. The child wants your proactive, unsolicited attention. 5 minutes out of an hour, it's nothing. And you get a new child. You actually get your child because that tantrum throwing creature isn't your child. That unconditional love will give her the kind of happiness where intermittent injustice, because that's going to happen. Intermittent unfairness. I mean, right now I'm quarantined in my house. Is that fair? Oh, I guess you could argue that it's not fair. It's just a thing that happens. And this kind of thing is going to happen to your child for the rest of her life. But if she feels loved, it won't bother her as much because she has what she wants most. Because with the love that she's always wanted, she's not always in a baseline condition of pain and neediness. When she doesn't feel loved, she's had it right up to here with pain. And then some sort of injustice comes and poof, it's above her nose and she's drowning. That's what you're doing when you give her proactive attention. You're lowering the water so that she can take the rise of an inch or two of water. So what can you do to prevent the violence, which is far easier than dealing with the violence once it's there? First, love her, like we just talked about. Read the parenting book. She's 5 years old. She's old enough to listen to you as you read it for 5-10 minutes at a time. I can't count how many children have said to their parents, after their parents have started the pattern of reading the parenting book with them every day. If you don't do it every day, then see, it just becomes another one of those little intermittent, injustices in her life. If you do it every day, it's common for children to say, Mom, how come we didn't read the parenting book? They may not be able to read the words, but they understand the words and the tone that you're reading. You can watch the parenting training on realloveparents.com every single day. Many children now around the world are watching the training with their parents and going, cool. In fact, I think it was yesterday that I read to you something that a mother said where her daughter came in, watched while the mother was watching this, and after a couple of minutes, her child, who she referred to as a wild and crazy kid, her child said, it's a good thing that you're learning to be a better mother, and off she went. Share this material with your kids. If you're not prepared so that you feel more informed and loved, which comes from watching these on the Facebook page or from going to realloveparents.com, if you're not prepared, you won't be able to help your daughter. You have to prepare to love and teach. It doesn't just descend out of the heavens naturally. Second, you can inform your daughter, this is to prevent violence, what the family's purpose is. Do you know how many children I've met whose parents have sat down with them and said, this is the purpose of our family? Nobody. I mean, essentially nobody. We just get up in the morning and we eat breakfast and we pick a fight with somebody and we eventually get ready for school and we're late and we get to the car and we're late again and there's hurry up. And if you ask a kid, what's the purpose of your family? Oh, to fight a lot and feed me and yell at me and I have to take a bath at night. And no, what's the purpose of your family? Tell her at 5, she'll get it. It's only 3 things. You tell her that the purpose of your family is so you feel loved. So you feel loved by me and by my partner, if you have a partner. That wasn't made clear. That's the first purpose. You feel loved. Second is so that you can learn to be loving. And the third purpose is so that you can learn to be responsible. And you can explain responsibility to a 5-year-old child pretty easily. If you feel loved, and if you're loving, and if you're responsible, you will be happy. And that is the purpose of our family. So you will be happy. We do all of this, you say. Children are now really paying attention to you. We do everything we do for you. Dang. A child who feels like they're the center of attention and who gets loved every day and whose mother goes and seeks her out for 5 minutes out of every hour. Such a child who feels loved begins to learn to feel loving and responsible, and such a child will never be violent. You're thinking, nah, it can't be that easy. Well, I didn't say it was easy. I said it was simple. But the roadblock that can just is always the problem is the parents, whether they're willing to consistently implement these steps, to implement loving their child and teaching them to be loving and to be responsible, which is why there are 45 hours of training in the Ridiculously Effective Parenting Training on realloveparents.com. Your daughter needs to learn these words, and at her age, at 5, oh, she really can. Because I've heard 5-year-olds talk about this to their parents, and they sound brilliant. They sound more eager to learn this and to have it implemented than their parents do. Then you tell her that whenever anybody in the family acts unloving or irresponsible, well, just show her. So our goal is that you feel loved, and you're loving, and you're responsible. So if anybody acts unloving or not responsible, what are we going to do? Watch what she says. She'll say something like, well, we'll do something about it, or we'll stop it, and you say, we are going to do something about it. We may not just stop it, but we're certainly going to talk about it. And now your daughter understands why you're going to have conversations about these things. See? Now everybody understands the purpose of the family and how we're going to achieve the purposes of the family. Everybody's on the same page instead of how most families run, which is mom or dad is the king or queen and just tells everybody what to do. And the kids feel helpless. And most, at least many, of the things you do seem to them arbitrary and therefore, what? What's her favorite phrase? Unfair. See? But if we're all on the same page, we all have the same purpose, we're not going to encounter injustice very often at all. So now what do you do in the presence of violence? So we've talked about preventing it, loving and teaching. What do you do in the presence of violence? You fulfill what you just said above. You're going to talk about it. So after she throws something, for example, you absolutely got to get this part. You cannot be angry. Can't. If you're angry when she throws something, now the two of you just as well be wallowing in the mud and having a little mud fight as peers. Because her throwing something indicates that she's angry. Then you respond with anger. We're going to fight fire with gasoline. This will never work out. So first step is no anger. But part of the first step is what you say with no anger. You say, can you tell me what you just did? Now, look how disarming that is. Because the normal thing that we say is, stop that, or how many times have I told you not to do that? And the child is used to you responding with anger to her anger. Now you're just calmly saying, tell me what you just did. You've already taken, she has weapons in her hand. In this case, literally is holding weapons. She's throwing. And if you get angry, you're pulling your guns out too. So we've got a gunfight. When you say, tell me what you just did, you're putting your guns down. That is very disarming to a little kid. Because the kid's got both guns trained on you, and then you just put your guns down. The kid's going, I thought this was going to be a gunfight. Now, it might take several tries, but you just asked a question. What did you just do? And eventually she says, they will. They know what they did. Never accept them acting stupid because they know. She'll say, boy, she'll mumble it probably. I threw the chair, or the ball or the axe or, whatever she threw. And then you say, what is our family learning to do? Notice how you're asking questions. Why? Because you're involving her. That's why. It involves her in the conversation. It's not a quiz. It's not a test. But instead of attacking her with, you did a bad thing, you hit your brother, look at the blood flowing down his face. We actually talked about an example in one of these live sessions of a child hitting her brother in the face and blood running down his face. You don't tell her what she's doing wrong. You say, what is our family learning to do? And it might take a little help from you because this is new stuff for them. Until she says, we're learning to be loving and responsible. Or she might just say, loving, doesn't matter. She'll get the answer because you've already gone over it several times before the violence. That's why I gave you some things to do to prevent it. And they are so not stupid. They know the answer. Then you say, another question. Because we're involving them. That's why. It's not a test. Was it loving? So our goal is to be loving. You're right. Was it loving to throw the chair at your brother or wherever she threw it? Doesn't matter. Through the window. Throw the chair, period. She knows the answer. No. They always pause because they feel a little ashamed about this point. And then you say, so when you threw the chair, I watched your face. Now, you're sneaking around to get to the real point here. I watched your face. What do you think? Do you think that when I watched your face, do you think your face looked happy or unhappy? You've got her. I mean, you just slowly backed her into the corner of the room and nailed her to the wall, but nicely. And she knows the answer. Unhappy. She might even say it like with a question mark. Then you say, so would you rather be happy or unhappy? Or you can just say, would you rather be happy than unhappy? Well, yes. She will say yes. And I know it might take a whole bunch of questions to get to this point in the conversation. What do you care? You've got an outline. And you say, I agree. Of course you would like to be happy. So instead of throwing the chair, which made you unhappy, what could you do? Now, all of your questions so far had really obvious answers. She will not know the answer to this one. It's an intentional, you can call it a trap, I suppose. I call it creation of a learning opportunity. It makes me feel better about myself. So what could you do instead? Don't let her suffer in not knowing for too long. Then you describe how she can express her anger with words. It's okay to be angry. People get angry. You can't just tell them, don't be angry. They are. But we don't get to throw chairs when we're angry. So she can express it with words. And if you go to the realoveparents.com and first you see the little intro of like 17 minutes of Find Your Child, look up the one on angry children, but there's introductions to children who cut themselves and are depressed and phone addictions and blah, blah, blah. They're all just little 17-minute segments. And then the next thing is watch the first free lesson. Well, it turns out that's a real lesson. It's part of the parenting training. It's what I call chapter 0. Watch chapter 0 of the parenting training. And it will teach you step by step how you teach a child to speak their anger and frustration instead of whining it, yelling it, or throwing chairs to express it. So notice in this one question, you've gotten how to prevent, how to love proactively, what to do when she does become violent, how to ask questions, how to teach her how to express her anger with words. In one question, you've learned a ton of stuff you need to learn how to do differently. It's never just the child who needs to learn. So that's a lot for you to do. But we can learn. The alternative is not to learn. And then we've got kids who are, pretty much guaranteed to be unhappy. There's just really no other choice. Somebody from our group, our Facebook group here, wrote to me yesterday. She's also a member of realloveparents.com, and she has worked through the parenting training. People who work through the parenting training get every week 3 support materials. They get a written answer to a question, they get a video answer to a question, and they participate in a conference call. So after people have taken the training, they get tons of ongoing support, all of which is archived. And she said, I just read your blog, which means she read one of the weekly support materials, the written answer, about how quickly electronic devices and their endless apps and programs have spread throughout the world. And you said, she's talking about me, you said this in your blog, quote, we were caught by surprise. The first phone that even remotely resembles the cell phones of today was introduced less than 20 years ago. And since then, the growth of their use has been explosive. We must be aware and make wise decisions about these devices whose effects on our children we are only beginning to grasp. End quote. That was a quote from me that this mother had read. She concluded, quote, I couldn't help but compare the growth of this unknown influence, electronics, and our being slow to respond effectively with the explosion of coronavirus. Also, in great part because of how slow we've been to, she's really kind of repeating herself. She's comparing how slowly we respond to the epidemic of phones and comparing that to how slowly we responded to the initial appearance of coronavirus and the price that it's caused us. This woman is a genius to see the comparison. Coronavirus exploded in China. And here's how it happened. On December 10, the first cases occurred. On December 16, they identified that it was a unique disease that caused infection in both lungs. It wasn't a bacteria, and it was not identified as the flu. So already by December 16, they're going, this is a new disease. Are they telling anybody? No, they're not. And that's the first thing a doctor does when he comes across a disease he doesn't know what's happening. He contacts, especially if it's an infectious disease or suspects that it is, he contacts the local infectious disease or health organization and goes, what is this? Help me. They were told in Wuhan, I don't know which way to pronounce it, I'm not Chinese, December 27, that's 17 days after the first occurrences, that it was coronavirus. But see, there are other coronaviruses. So they didn't know that this was a new thing. They just identified that it was one, kind of like saying the flu. There are tons of them, H1N1, H7N9, it just goes on and on. December 30, the director of Wuhan's biggest hospital sends out a message on WeChat, much like our Facebook, but actually way bigger. And he sent out a message about it, and he was reprimanded for putting out a message about it, reprimanded by the government. On January 1, the doctors making noise about it were brought in for questioning by who? By the Chinese health authorities? No, by the Chinese security authorities. They were afraid of making China look bad. One doctor was ordered to stop testing and to destroy samples they already had. So here we've got almost 3 weeks now of hiding this and like overtly hiding it, where they're being told, don't you talk about this. Finally, the World Health Organization announces that there's no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of this coronavirus. That's January 14. So we're still hiding it. This is now 5 weeks later. January 18, the disease is spreading like crazy in Wuhan. Tens of thousands of people gather in one place for potluck celebrations of the new year. January 21, the government mentions a possible problem for the first time, and 2 days later, this is one of the advantages of having a dictatorship or a totalitarian regime, the entire town and area is locked down, like with soldiers. A study published earlier this month indicated that if the authorities had acted 3 weeks earlier, and that's really giving them the benefit of the doubt because it really kind of ran on for like 6 weeks before they did anything about it. If they'd just acted 3 weeks earlier, the number of coronavirus cases would have been reduced by 95%. 95%, which would have done what to the spread of it everywhere else in the world? Well, it had to have made a difference. And so because of hiding it and ignorance and not acting sooner, this thing has now spread all over the world. I am not making a political comment here. I'm using it as a metaphor. China's experience has been repeated in many countries since then, including ours. We have responded with insufficient speed. We always, and it's just a human quality. I'm not referring to people's politics. It is a human quality to go, oh, it'll be okay. We don't have quite enough gas in the tank to get somewhere, but oh, it'll be okay, we say, as the car finally glub pulls over to the side of the road 10 miles away from the place that we were going to. We didn't respond with the sufficient speed or degree to this threat. People were given guidelines, but they weren't officially quarantined. Just today, I read an announcement that where the government said anybody leaving the New York City area is advised to quarantine themselves for 2 weeks. Well, advising them to, but not requiring them to means nothing because people are going to do what they want to do. And 2 weeks isn't long enough. We established that. The NBA is closed down. The NHL is closed down. Major League Baseball is done. One United States senator has got the disease. The number of reported deaths from COVID-19 in one recent week, not this week, but the week before that, went up by 10 times. That's 1,000% for those of you who like to play percent. People are beginning to catch on to what this disease is. Now, I'm not saying any of this to be alarmist. I'm not afraid. I'm not. I'm being prudent. For the past 11 days, as soon as I started to see the trend of the graphs being clearly demonstrated or repeated in this country, the graphs that we previously saw in China, 11 days ago, we isolated ourselves. Nobody told us to. There was no government mandate. We just did. Every package is attacked by the household official demon disease destroyer. That's Donna, my wife. The 4 Ds, Donna, the demon disease destroyer. She loves the title. We're just being prudent, but we're acting quickly and thoroughly. And yeah, we can still get it, I suppose, but we've certainly reduced the odds of it tremendously. Information restriction. Now, the metaphor. Coronavirus has spread and caused illness and death of vast proportions, in great part because of ignorance and failure to respond quickly. Similarly, in fact, very similarly, with alarming similarity, we're in the process of watching the effects of us and our children being infected by electronic devices. They are a virus. Sneakier than a physical virus because the incubation period is longer and more variable from person to person. Nobody actually dies. Turns out that actually some people have died from the addiction and from becoming depressed and they've killed themselves, but we'll weed that out and just say nobody actually dies, which is why we're ignoring it, one of the reasons. And the prevalence is almost universal. Everywhere I go, I see people sitting on their phones and texting each other, even when they're sitting next to each other, to the person they're texting. So it's accepted as normal. And that's one of the reasons coronavirus grew so quickly. Fever and a cough. So what? But then they started doing x-rays and CTs and going, this isn't just your regular cough, and this isn't just flu. But now we're beginning to see the effects better and better, not only of the coronavirus, but of electronics. It's affecting, and this isn't hypothesis. These are consistent studies that Our use of phones and other electronic devices are affecting negatively a lot our ability to socialize in person. It's increasing people's sense of isolation and depression and suicidal thoughts and, naturally, suicide. It's changing the function and the structure. It's actually changing the shape of some parts of the brain. It's increasing a sense of entitlement and a kind of overall, a good way to say it is just attitude of kids. It's diminishing the credibility of parents and the ability to influence their children. It is a real, flaming, on fire, pandemic addiction. And so far, what are we doing? Nothing. Most families aren't. There are a very few families who are making little token efforts, like many people are doing with the coronavirus, of saying, well, in our family, we restrict the use, and when I get real specific with them, like to exactly how long and where and what applications, and in other words, the parents are just sitting there on their devices and intermittently looking at their children while they're using their devices. There's a great deal more about this in the Ridiculously Effective Parenting Training. Just as with coronavirus, the sooner we see the effects of electronics and the sooner we restrict access, the metaphor is beautiful, understand it and restrict access, or isolate, if you like, quarantine our children from the use of them, the more that we'll avoid the impending disaster that is already developing, and developing quickly. So again, I am not an alarmist by nature. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't sit and watch terrible things that happen in the news. But this thing's happening. The people who first began to identify coronavirus were thought to be alarmists and making a big deal out of nothing. Yeah, it turns out they were prophets. And that's the case here. We've got to pay attention to what's happening with our kids. Compare your children's behavior now to before electronics. You may not be able to do that because now there's an entire generation of kids who are growing up who've never been without phones. If you want to find out what the effects of electronics are on your children, it's very easy. Remove them entirely. I mean it. Remove them entirely for 2 weeks. Because one of the definitions of addiction is what? You can't easily stop them. And when you withdraw it, people go into withdrawal, and they do it with porn, they do it with narcotics, they do it with alcohol, and they do it with their electronics. Reach over and say, we're going to go without electronics for 2 weeks and take all of your children's devices and see if they smile and say, oh, thank you for being so foresightful, mother. And thereby you will have done two things. You will have implemented the initial isolation, and you will have proven that there is an addiction and a virus we need to pay attention to. We'll talk some more tomorrow.